Welcome to the new sound of online radio. Welcome to the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network. 'Cause you make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven. A mix of today's hits and hard-to-find favorites, combined with the most entertaining and intriguing talk anywhere. This is your sound. This is the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network at UPNradio.com.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie, where we believe an experience becomes truth. I'm your host, Tony Sweet, and joining me now in studio, world-renowned psychic, Eddie Connor, and our co-host today is Walt Lusk. Thank you for supporting our sponsors, Conscious Life Expo, by going to ConsciousLifeExpo.com for their February 2015 event.
And take your mind on a literary journey by traveling over to AdventuresUnlimitedPress.com to purchase books from our famed experts featured right here on Truth Be Told with Tony Sweet. With the current discussion of a manned mission to Mars, this brings up a long-time debate about whether or not there is actually life on Mars. Hi, everybody. I'm Eddie Connor. In our first hour today, we're speaking with Mike Bara. Mike is a New York Times best-selling author, screenwriter, and lecturer, as well as a self-described born-again conspiracy theorist, as well as our guest expert today.
And today, listeners will recognize Mike from the hit show Ancient Aliens, speaking about evidence of pyramids and artificial ruins found all over the surface of Mars, which will make for a great interview.
I can't wait. Tony, Walt, let's welcome best-selling author Mike Bara.
Mike, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We're great. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. First of all, I'm here with my co-host Eddie Connor and Walt Lusk.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, hi, how you doing, Walt?
Hey, Mike. I'm good. That was Eddie. I'm
Walt. Eddie. Hi, Eddie.
Hey, Mike.
Well, you know, I'm
Eddie Walt.
There we go. Yeah, let's call the whole thing off. I'm so excited to have you on the show. I'm so honored to have you on the show. It's I'm a big fan of yours, and you know, there's so much that we have to ask you, and I'm sure every interview you do, you get a lot of the same questions. So I'm hoping we don't, bore you with our excitement because.
Oh God, me too, actually, guys.
Right. Oh, there we go. But let's go ahead and get started because
real honest radio, folks.
Right.
Is there really
right.
a psychic there? Do you guys?
Yeah.
Be nice. Be gentle, Mike.
Yeah, Mike.
Which one's the psychic?
Eddie.
Walt.
Yeah.
No, I'm the psychic. Eddie's the psychic.
Oh, okay. Well, I have a very close dear friend who actually dedicated the new Mars book to Denise Zach, who is an extremely talented psychic. She started out as an animal intuitive, and
that's great.
She's a big part of my life. She's like a sister to me, and so I don't know. I'll just be interested to see what if anything comes out.
Oh, that's great.
You get today. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, let's open it wide open and see if anybody from upstairs wants to talk to us.
You're our favorite kind of guest, Mike.
We
just
do.
So you know.
Okay.
There's a few people that get scared of that stuff.
Absolutely.
So. Well, first of all, for the people out there that really don't know much about this subject, Mike is the expert that you go to, especially when it comes to Mars, because we're talking about the new mission to Mars here. I think they're, I don't know if it's NASA or a private company, but it really brings up a lot of questions of the old questions of life on Mars. And I know your books and your theories are amazing. And I want to go back to where you started getting interested, like many of our listeners and even ourselves, of that beginning interest in Mars.
Oh yeah.
Well, I've always had interest in in paranormal subjects and UFOs and things like that. And I remember distinctly watching the moon landings in the 1960s and 70s. And I remember just having this weird feeling that they're hiding something. They're not showing us everything. I couldn't figure out why the television pictures were so bad. I mean, I knew the moon was a long way away, but that really shouldn't have impacted the TV picture, that much. And why did we get this horrible gray pictures of the moon? And it just felt like there was a lot of things that were not really.
Absolutely. Funny how it was black and white on the moon, but it was color everywhere else.
Yeah. And, actually, it's really interesting that. I remember thinking, well, my family has a color TV. Why couldn't they show us this in color? And it turned out later on, I found out that they did have a color camera on board Apollo 11, and they were ordered to leave it in orbit in the command module and not take it to the moon. Yeah. And that this was all very deliberate. And then you had, like the Apollo 12 incident where they got out of the lunar module, and pretty much the first thing they did is take the camera and point it right at the sun and burn the optics out, which is the one thing they were trained not to do. And then very recently somebody just did a really great report. I'm gonna put this in my new book, Ancient Aliens and Secret Societies, for next year, where he's put together a really strong circumstantial case that they did what's called a stand-up EVA, where they basically depressurized the lunar module and opened the top hatch, and one of the guys stood on top of the engine housing for the ascent engine and looked around. And I think what they were doing, this is all secret. This is like a secret 18-minute gap in the transmissions, or the second 18-minute gap we've had in political history.
Right.
And I think what they were doing is they were trying to figure out what you would be able to see. Like, would you be able to see these ruins? Because I think Apollo 11 was pretty much symbolic. They were very worried that you might be able to see something over the horizon, but they weren't sure if anything would be there. And 12, I think they just were like definitely scanning the sky, and then they come out and the first thing they do is point the camera at the sun. So I got a feeling there was stuff at Apollo 12 at that landing site that they didn't want the American people to see. And anyway, that takes it way back. And then along the way I started. I remember the face on Mars when it was first in the newspapers and things. Yes. And then one day at Boeing, which despite some people claiming I never worked there, I worked there for 15 very long years, and amongst many other places in the aerospace industry, and they were watching a video of Richard C. Hoagland's speech at the UN, and he was talking about the face on Mars, and I remember going, wow, I remember that thing, and to me, it was like, this is something you can put your finger on. Like UFOs, alien abductions, you're never really going to be able to prove those kinds of things, I didn't feel. Although my experiences on Uncovering Aliens, the reality show I was on, may sort of, I may change my mind on that. But I thought that was what was really interesting and intriguing about the face, was that if we could just get good, honest pictures at higher resolution, we could probably determine whether or not it was natural or artificial. And I thought, wow, this is something you could actually prove. And that was really attractive to me. So... And then lo and behold, you know how the universe arranges things, and the next thing you know, I'm talking to Hoagie on the phone a lot, and then I start writing articles for his website, and the whole thing just takes off from there. So that's how I ended up in this place at this time, talking to you guys on Skype.
And Richard C. Hoagland has done an amazingly ton. I think he's probably one of the ones that's scoured every square centimeter of the moon as best he could.
Yeah. Well, I don't think anybody can do that. I mean, I just recently found some pictures somebody posted in a Facebook group, the Lunar Anomalies Research Society, LARS, I think it is. You should look it up. But it was an amazing picture from one of the lunar orbiters that I'm going to have to really go back and go over and do some enhancement work on. It looks like, again, there's just incredible, very damaged, degraded, but this whole vast cityscape that they took high resolution images of, and so there's just so much on the moon that
there is. And
if anybody knows the moon pretty, that well, it's probably the Hoagie. But
I know the thing is he's perpetuating with other countries, because China, of course, is going to the moon next, and they just had they announced it, and they did a color map of the moon, and they showed everybody that here's a color map and whatnot of the moon, and that was all well and good until they released it on the internet, and it was in black and white.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
wow.
What's also really intriguing is that lots and lots of people are taking, images of the moon with much better optical telescopes and stuff, and they're coming out very colorful.
Yes.
And when you enhance them, just brighten up just intensify the color. It's even more colorful, and it's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be this bright white gray. And of course, there's this whole thing you can go back to, which is in my third book, Ancient Aliens on the Moon, for those of you that are listening, where I talk about this theory that Hoagland has of glass tower, these sort of towering glass scaffolding structures.
There's supposed to be one like 20 stories
that are
high.
bending the light and causing all kinds of refraction and reflection.
Yeah.
And that would account for all the colors that we see. And there's really no natural model that can account for it. So that's sort of just now kind of flowing forward too. So
can I ask you this, because this is a big controversy of did we ever even go to the moon? Do you believe we went to the moon?
Yeah, I don't think it's a big controversy. And again, in Ancient Aliens on the Moon, I cover this really extensively. We also covered it, Richard and I, in our book Dark Mission from 2007. And yeah, we definitely went. The arguments that we didn't go, the photographic arguments and some of those things really fall apart very quickly. I know Jay Weidner has recently tried to claim that Stanley Kubrick filmed the moon landings.
I've heard that from John. I've heard that from John Lear as well.
I think I can blow that argument away. I mean, at least as I understand his arguments, I think I've got some really good, solid stuff to knock him out of the park on that one. But I just none of the arguments really added up to my mind, and I cover them pretty extensively in Ancient Aliens on the Moon too. So I'd say we went, and it all comes back to. There's a great documentary called In the Shadow of the Moon, which is you could probably pick up on pay-per-view or something like that, or on demand, and interviews pretty much all the surviving astronauts except for Neil Armstrong, who of course doesn't talk. And you listen to them talk, and they describe their experiences. And the last guy, I think it's Charlie Duke, says, people say we faked the moon landings. He goes, but let's be honest about it. He says, we went to the moon 9 times. He has that Texan accent, 9 times. If we were going to fake it, why would we fake it 9 times? And it's like that to me kind of comes to the end of it. So I'll just say that if you want to get to the technical arguments, they don't add up. They don't really hold up under scrutiny. And then beyond that, there's just a simple argument of, hey, why would you fake it 9 times? You might only fake it like once or twice or 3 or 4 times if you were faking it. So it doesn't hold water for me.
Yeah, and Mike, I want to ask you about your interest in UFOs and the link between science and spirit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is it between science and spirit with the UFOs that has you the most intrigued right now?
Well, I wrote my second book was called The Choice, and it was really about physics and spirituality and how all of this kind of crazy new age hippie stuff that people believe in actually has a very solid scientific basis, much more solid than most people actually realize. Yeah. And it was really gratifying when I was touring behind that book, giving a lot of speeches to different new age communities, places like Ojai, where there's a lot of hippies. And I mean, I'm not a hippie. Okay. I'm not into the hippie thing, but when I would tell them that, look, you've always believed that everything's alive and everything's connected. And I would tell them stories about the experiments of, let's say, Cleve Baxter, who hooked plants up to a lie detector. He was a lie detector expert. Wow. And he had the thought, well, I think I'm going to burn one of the leaves. And the lie detector went crazy. And he eventually determined that the plant not only could read his mind, it could read his intents. And so there's a consciousness to everything. And when I would tell them these different experiments that were out there that they'd never heard of or never had been put all together in one package for them, it was really gratifying to see how many people felt validated by that. And, I was really glad to have done it. That book is still probably my proudest accomplishment. And just recently this week, we had some more, one of the predictions I made in terms of how the physics works and stuff, how the real physics of this universe works, not what they show you in Interstellar, but how it really works, was that there'd be 1 or 2 planets found way out, about 500 astronomical units away from our current solar system. And there was just some new work that was just published in scientific journals basically supporting that premise very solidly. So anyway, to get back to your original question, what's the connection? To me, I think that aliens themselves, from my experience, and I have no personal experience other than a couple of sightings, both of which have happened in the last 3 or 4 years, and my experiences on Uncovering Aliens, a TV show I did for Animal Planet. There are people that have direct contact with extraterrestrials, but what I think the aliens really are is, I don't know that the physical form that they take, and this is just my personal take on it, is actually their real physical form. I think they're so different from us that we kind of assign a physical form to them so that we can recognize it and recognize their presence. And I really think that they're also partially hyperdimensional beings. In other words, they exist partly in this three-dimensional realm and partly in other realms, and they travel back and forth. And so my belief is that that's the one thing you ultimately have to come to, because simply being aliens living on a planet that's like Earth, only hundreds of light years away or thousands of light years away, it's not that simple. It's more complicated than that. The communication seems to be more complicated than that. The interactions are far more complicated than that. So to me, there's something even bigger and going on. And if you can prove, or at least make a really strong argument, that there are other dimensions than the three that we experience, and time perhaps being the fourth, I think if you can make that argument pretty solidly, then you're kind of trying to crossing the bridge, or making the connections that are ultimately going to explain everything about our existence. Even if I'm not even really sure if we're meant to understand everything, but at least those of us that really want to understand it better, I think it would help.
Well, and the funny thing is, the danger of us understanding everything with the way most humanity thinks and behaves right now would be absolutely detrimental to the entire universe, I think.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. And, it's interesting because with my psychic friend, I recently did a session, and there's some personal issues going on in my life that I'm really not pleased about. And I'm kind of lobbying my higher angels to get me out of this situation. And along the way, I had a really interesting dream a couple months ago, where I was actually in my dream being slid out of my bed by aliens, and I was like, oh no, it's not going to happen. And of course, it didn't really happen in the physical realm, but it was really interesting because as we talked through it with my psychic friend, they are here, but you have to understand that they don't understand some things either. There's things that they aren't. Just because they're aliens and they have advanced technology doesn't mean that they're superior to us. In many ways, they're ignorant. And one of the things she talked about was that with abductees, people that have contact, and I'm not saying I'm one of them because I've never had any conscious contact with them, but that there can be an interaction there can be an exchange of physical matter, and if that happens, it can drive the human being a little bit crazy, because they're vibrating at a different frequency, because they exist more, let's say, in the fifth dimension than in the third. And if you get that intermixed with your body, then it's going to make you a little bit nuts. It's going to make you kind of feel like you want to crawl out of your skin. So it's a really interesting perspective, and I think it has something to do with the fact that there's stuff that we can learn from them, and there's things that they're here to learn from us as well. What was the question?
You totally.
I'll try to make my answers shorter.
Well, you answered the question. I want to go backwards for 1 second. Who was the name of the gentleman that did the lie detector experiments on the plants?
It's Cleve, Cleve Baxter, Bakster, I believe. Might be a CK, but Bakster. Cleve Baxter. You can read about his stuff online, or you can just get my book, The Choice.
And
and not only do I give you what he did, but I put it in the context of the bigger picture. So that's where you get.
And which makes me think: did Dr. Emoto, do you think he took a page from Cleve's book and from his studies?
Yeah, I don't know who that is off the top of my head.
Okay.
Can you fill me in on it?
Absolutely. Dr. Emoto is a Japanese scientist who wrote, I think his first book was The Secret Messages in Water. And he's talking about it. He did lots and lots of experiments on it. And the human body is composed of over 80% water.
Sure. Sure.
And he was linking the thoughts we have, meaning the human body is electromagnetic, we know that. And we know we're energetic, and everything is energy, like what you were just talking about, Mike. And he would set in front of these little culture dishes of water, pure water, sometimes swamp water, sometimes sewer. And he would send, and not just him, other people too, he would tell them exactly the energy he wanted them to send, like if you're thinking about angels, or if you're thinking about someone you love, or if you're thinking about the happiest moment in your life, the water would begin to crystallize into snowflakes and angels and smiley faces. And it was all scientifically documented. And then he would look into the water and he would say, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. And then he would think all of these scary thoughts, like he would watch a news broadcast that was really dark, and he would focus that dark energy on the water. And you can see it in the books. And the thing, it turned into a gun. And it's like,
wow.
So,
No. So I have vaguely heard of this stuff, and yeah, I think it is connected. But Baxter was he may have been building off Cleve Baxter's work, but there's also the work with there's cymatics. I assume you guys know about cymatics, right? Which is where you basically they'll take sterilized water or something along those lines and salt and put the salt in. It's usually sea salt or something. Put it in there, and I'll put it on a metal plate and vibrate it at different frequencies. And depending on the frequency, it makes specific geometric designs.
Yep.
And again, that's just it's frequency and fluid, and
energy,
really,
energy.
to get not that I thought we were going to talk all about the choice today, but this is cool because I like this. I feel like we exist in a fluid. I mean,
yes.
There's this fluid of energy all around us, and that it's the same thing. Yeah, we can influence that with our thoughts and so forth, and I think that the two people's work, Baxter and this other guy, probably do complement each other at the very least.
And speaking of frequency and choice and that sort of thing, and your third book, your third book is Ancient Aliens on the Moon. Your second book is
and then
The
Ancient
Choice.
Aliens on Mars,
Perfect.
and then Ancient Aliens on Mars 2.
Beautiful.
Mars
And
too.
by the way,
That took 2 because Mars has got so much cool stuff on it.
Right?
Again?
yeah, and
Yeah, I had to do 2 of them.
good. That's a good sign. And they can find you also at MikeBara.com, BARA, correct?
Yeah, actually, it's mikebara.blogspot.com. But you can just Google me, and it's the first page that comes up. Followed by a lot of trolling, crazy, insane people that hate me for whatever reason. They hate me because I'm on TV and they're not.
That's right.
You know,
Good jealous bastards.
Isn't that a fascinating phenomenon? I mean, for real. I mean, the first couple of times I was on really big radio shows back in the, I think the first time I stepped on the air was in 1993, and I love this. I love talking about this, metaphysics, spirituality, the paranormal, frequency, how we create our realities, and talking to people like you, Mike, because there's not enough of that out in the world.
No,
and as soon as they threw me on the radio with some other big famous psychic back from Texas, it ended up, I am not joking, the switchboards blew up. And I don't mean blew up like there was a lot of calls coming in. I mean it shut the switchboard down in one of the biggest radio stations in the southeastern United States. And people freak out.
Yeah.
When you know what? I think they freak out. Yeah, child, because you want TV and they're not. Okay. That's number one. And number two, it is you have such conviction. You absolutely have done the background work. You have been in the trenches. You're speaking your truth from your heart chakra, and you've got the science to back it up. And most humans have a really hard time thinking outside of their little limited bubble.
It's intimidating.
And anything outside of that is too much change too quick messes them up, or they allow it to mess them up.
I think I watched a little piece you did on an interview, and you may have done this a couple times, but you talked about back in the day of War of the Worlds with
H.G. Wells,
to see when people reacted, and that's why a lot of times they're worried that we can't handle it. Because they're fearful of the unknown, and for me, I'm like, bring them on. But I think I agree with you in that statement that the fear of the unknown is just freezes. I mean, it makes people paranoid.
It's interesting because that the Brookings report, which is what a lot of this stuff is based on, it said the people, if we discover alien life, the people that are going to have the hardest time admitting that and facing that reality are the scientists and the engineers,
of course,
and because
Christians.
it challenges their worldview, and also because they have so much of their self-esteem built into this concept of, well, I'm smarter than everybody else because I went to school and I got this degree and I got my PhD in geology, which I don't know how a PhD in geology qualifies you to identify artificial structures, but okay. Just as a side jab at everybody at NASA. But, there's this investment that they have. So they not only do they have to admit that they were wrong, they have to admit that their place in the world is not what they thought it was. And so anybody who's the simplest thing to do is, rather than deal with the information that contradicts their worldview and their own personal value they place on themselves. It's easier to just attack the person presenting the information. So there's part of it. Part of it is jealousy. I should be on TV, not him. And the other part of it is this genuine survival instinct that you must be a heretic. I mean, it's amazing to me how many people will come onto my photo sites or to my YouTube channel and just right off the top, call me some crazy name or tell me that a particular object is a digital artifact, and I'm like, that was the first thing that was looked at and discounted in this image 25 years ago. So not even it's like but they'll just leap on anything, and they immediately they can't just argue with the data. They have to make you into a bad person.
Exactly.
And that's the part that's like, well, I'm just not gonna sit still for that. I'm a pretty easygoing guy, but if you take a swing at me, I'm gonna hit you back.
Well, and I love that, by the way. Now I want to get back to frequency and talking more about the UFOs and that sort of thing with you. In that, do you think that once you open yourself up, like you have, to expanding your consciousness, opening your mind and your heart, and really thinking way outside of the comfort zone, do you think that also makes you a little more susceptible energetically, Mike, to being at the right place at the right time to experience some of these extraordinary things with UFOs and possibly even visitations?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I never had a UFO sighting. And so it was like, I'd never even had a sighting, much less any kind of contact experience. So when when Animal Planet hired me to be the skeptic on their show, I was like, well, when I'm saying, I need to see proof before I'll really believe anything. I mean, I was telling the truth, and then getting involved with the show. I mean, we were out doing what they call a sizzle reel in New York City, where they had a bunch of us out there kind of trying out for the show. They picked the 4 cast members, and on top of the hotel, the first night in Brooklyn, I'm sitting up there with 2 of the female cast members drinking beer. And I had my first sighting. And the first, again, I grew up in the aerospace industry. My dad worked at Boeing. I worked at Boeing. I worked in the aerospace industry for 25 years. And I know my airplanes. And this was not any kind of vehicle that we've ever created. So that experience was like, I thought, wow, isn't it fascinating? I'm here to work on this show. And I have my first UFO sighting in New York City, of all places. And then actually during the show, we were near Sedona shooting one of the episodes, and one of the cast members, Steven, who's had a lot of contact, goes, come and show us yourselves. And like almost immediately 3 objects appeared in the sky right above our heads. And we videotaped those and showed them on the show. And, those were extraordinary experiences, but they were definitely brought on by some shift in intensity and focus and mentality, and also by Steven's direct and open invitation.
And did your intuitive friend also say that while you were in New York, that was absolutely them giving you a sign that that's the perfect door for you to walk through at that moment?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's exactly what she said. Yeah. So, that it was meant for me, not the other people on the roof. And I'm like, okay, well, great, I got it, because it was definitely different. I mean, I've always known UFOs exist. It's a whole different thing though when you see them and you realize that what you saw is not explainable as conventional aircraft. That's when it really gets exciting. So.
And you have witnesses.
Yeah, I have witnesses. Although one of them, Maureen, one of my co-stars, she freaked out when she first saw it, and she has issues. I think she's actually been abducted and doesn't really want to admit it to herself. And so then she goes back into her shell, and now she's managed to convince herself that it was a Chinese lantern.
My God.
I'm like, really? A rapidly rotating Chinese lantern? Yeah, okay, got it. Which spins and moves and stops and hovers and changes direction. Okay, sure, whatever. But again, I just think back to Brookings, and I think, well, whatever makes her sleep well at night, that's okay.
There you go. And if you're just tuning in, we're talking with Mike Bara, and he's talking about UFOs and frequency. He has, like 5 or 6 books, right, Mike?
Oh, well, I actually got, Dark Mission is one. The Choice, which is about, Dark Mission is, of course, the big political book about the secret history of NASA.
Which was
The
your
Choice,
best-selling
which is about
book?
Yeah, thank you. Which is about physics and metaphysics. That was the first one on my own. And then Ancient Aliens on the Moon, Ancient Aliens on Mars, Ancient Aliens on Mars 2, and I'm working on number 6. So yeah, I've got 5 of them out right now.
And
they're all cool.
I'm showing
You
them
should
on the
buy them all
display
from
right now.
Adventures Unlimited Press.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What was
No,
that?
no, I just said I'm showing it on the display right now of all your
Good, okay.
books. So, but yeah, Adventures Unlimited Press is an amazing place to go
Absolutely
to pick
it
up
is.
books.
Yeah.
And many of our people that we've had on the show.
Yes.
Well, this was another question, and we're going to go to the moon first before we go to Mars.
Let's
Okay.
go to the moon.
Okay.
Let's do that.
We talk about UFOs and aliens on the moon, but do we secretly have government facilities on the moon? Do you know of, or do we?
Not that I know of. People ask me that all the time, and I suppose it's possible, but I don't really see any evidence for that. What I see on the moon is stuff that is very, very old, and it is in ruins, and it's part of I think an ancient civilization. So, it's one of those things where I hear those stories, but I don't have any proof of that.
And Mike, when you say ancient civilizations, are you saying like space colonies that were there once before, or was the moon similar to Earth in the way that we have the oxygen and the water and that sort of thing?
No, I don't think so. I think it's always that's what I think that these glass structures are that Hoagie's always talking about, and that I cover in the book. Is I think that's a meteor shield in order to create, an environment on the moon where they could actually work and function. There's some images we have of what appear to be domes over craters, actually like watch crystal style glass kind of domes, and I think that's probably the lowest level. And then above that, you have this multi-layered glass structure, which again, steel with no oxygen in it, glass becomes about as strong as steel, if not stronger.
Really?
So it at very, very light weight, it's a great protective shield for meteor impacts if you don't have an atmosphere to protect you like the Earth does. So what I see is the ruins of an ancient civilization. What weirds me out is that a lot of the architecture the engineering is like it's human-like, but it's on a much grander scale. So I think to myself, well, wouldn't alien architecture be different? I mean, would the principles of design be exactly the same, or would they be different? I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure whether it's truly alien in the sense that somebody from somewhere else built this stuff, or whether it's it's what the Hopi talk about, the third world of man, where they talk about the previous world of man that was highly advanced, even more advanced than we are today.
Yep.
And it could be their ruins. I mean, I just really don't know. I just know that it's I think everything I've seen is very old, and for the most part, it's in a state of degradation right now.
You mean it's not the Greys?
Well, it could be. Some of it could be. And again, you could be looking at multiple different epochs. You could be looking at some human civilization from long ago, from like an Atlantean civilization. You could be looking at gray stuff. You could be looking at, I don't know, reptilians, anything. It's just really hard to tell without going there and looking around.
And because I know, let's jump over to Mars real quick, because I know that you were talking about the pyramids on Mars, a D&M pyramid. And I found it fascinating because I didn't even know that China had pyramids. And I'm going to put a picture up to compare. And you were talking about the two, or the one on Mars and the one in China are very similar to each other. Could you explain that for the listeners? And kind of describe, and I'm showing it up on the screen, but and just kind of give us a little more description of that.
Well, there are recently discovered pyramids in China, or actually they were discovered in the like late 1940s, but really only pictures have come out only really fairly recently. And I was looking around. I was doing a segment in the book, in the first Mars book, on the pyramids of Elysium, which is what Carl Sagan called some three-sided tetrahedral pyramids.
Right.
That he had seen. And I did a search on, pyramids Elysium, and I found this image, and it was a four-sided pyramid, and it looked almost to me exactly like these Chinese pyramids. And when I put them up side by side, I was like, whoa, yeah. And then I laid one over the other, and they matched up perfectly. And the pyramid on Mars it's in isolation. It's not part of a mountain chain. I mean, a lot of people like to talk about the Bosnian pyramids, but they're part of a mountain chain. So to my mind, they could be natural. But when you have a pyramidal shaped structure and it's isolated all by itself, just the way a real, artificial pyramid is on Earth, that's a pretty good sign that somebody built it. And then when I overlaid them, the slumping pattern of the pyramids in China, like, you know, how they would sag in on one side and the edges would stay stiff, but the middle would kind of collapse a little bit. The erosion, the slumping was exactly the same. And so it became really obvious to me we're looking at the same thing on Mars as we are on Earth, only at a different scale. The one on Mars is much bigger, but obviously it was a superior technological civilization that built it. So to me, I look at stuff like this and I'm just like, okay, you know, if you looked at a picture of this object and you were told it was on Earth, you would say that's a pyramid and somebody built it.
Right.
The only reason you don't say that immediately upon viewing it is if somebody tells you it's from Mars. Then people go, oh, it can't possibly be a pyramid. Well, if it fits all the descriptions and all of the, all the determinations that we would want to make, all the measurements to be a pyramid, and again, the sides are equal, things like that. It's just stunning in its perfection. So, that's how I come to those conclusions.
Now, do you think, because I know we've had people on talking about the Anunnaki, do you think that the Anunnaki might have been responsible for the pyramids on Mars?
Mars or Earth.
Well, yeah, I think more likely Mars. I mean, I think that the pyramids on Earth, for the most part, are remnants of memories of this previous technology that used to exist that we probably built. But that's just my theory. I could be wrong. But I think on Mars, you're looking at a very, advanced civilization that has some connection to the Earth, because there's other areas of Mars where there's, for instance, what appears to be a sphinx kind of out in front of the two Twin Peak pyramids at the Pathfinder landing site, which, contrary to what impression you might have gotten from recent Ancient Aliens broadcasts, I'm pretty much the one who brought attention to that. You have these structures that are the same, and I look at it and it seems like there's some sort of connecting civilization between the two planets. And if that's the case, then what's the connection? Well, the obvious choice is the Anunnaki. And, when people talk about the word Nibiru that Sitchin talks about, it's called commonly the planet of the crossing. Well, most people assume that's some sort of crossing in the sky. What if that actually is the crossing of the two species, the crossing between the Anunnaki and the human race, or the Anunnaki and Neanderthals? So the planet of the crossing could very well be, in my opinion, Mars. And then at the end of the second Mars book, Ancient Aliens on Mars 2, I talk about, again, the Brookings report and how it talked about that society should be slowly conditioned to these discoveries if we were to make them, and slowly we should tell people the true story. And then I come across a comic book called The Face on Mars. And a lot of us have heard of The Face on Mars at Sidonia, and of course Richard's done a lot of research, and both of my Mars books have a lot to do with The Face on Mars. The problem was that was found in 1976, and this comic book was written in 1958 by Jack Kirby. And in the book, they find a face on Mars, which looks an awful lot like the face on Mars, and the astronauts climb up. One of them falls into the eyeball, and he has this whole vision of what happened to the planet Mars. And in it, he sees this race of, get this, giants. Does that sound like the Anunnaki? Yay! They're living on their world. They get attacked by what appear to be machines. So in other words, they built these machines and they made them too smart, and the machines turned on them, and there was a war, and the only way for them to survive was to destroy the machine planet, which is very nearby because it explodes, and then that devastates Mars, and they die out or they have to leave Mars. And again, I'm looking at this going, oh, okay, so we have the Anunnaki, we have the face on Mars. One of the theories I talk about in the Mars books is that Mars is not a planet. It's actually a moon of a very large, what they call a super Earth, that used to exist in that same orbit and blew up. And that's why you see this massive cratering and devastation all over the surface of Mars. So, everything's there. I'm reading this comic book from 1958, and everything is there at least 25 years before the face on Mars was ever even photographed. And it's like, you look at that and you kind of think to yourself, somebody knows what's going on better than we do.
Yes,
right.
And they're going to find a way to get it out there. So the right people at the right place who are finally open enough to see it, hear it, understand it, it will be drawn to them. I want to ask you, speaking of the moon and Mars, and this is going to sound like a woo-woo question, and even as a psychic, I'm not a woo-woo psychic at all. I like the grounded stuff too. My question is, how much of the, quote, Atlantean people have you bumped into who say, I've had past lives in Atlantis, and or the whole philosophy around Atlantis also being a very strong intergalactic exchange program between Earth and other planets?
I hear those kinds of things. I hear those stories. It's not my field. I mean, I can't, when people talk about a past life, like I can work with my psychic friend and we can talk about my past lives and karma I may have brought into this lifetime and things that I have to deal with. But to me, it's like, I can't quantify that. I can't put any numbers on it. I can't measure it. It all comes down to just my personal belief, whether I really think the person's telling the truth. Now, that's a theory. It's out there. All I can say is that it's not my area. It's more for somebody like Laura Eisenhower, who, is kind of into all that stuff. So I just got to say it's not really my area. But I don't disbelieve those stories. It's just that to me, they're just stories.
So let's bring it back to more of what we're talking about today, and not quite so far back in Atlantis. How many people have you bumped into that you really feel in your heart and in your mind and your gut who have told you they've been abducted or that they've been on ships and they can recall it? Have you met that they're telling the truth when you're hearing it?
Oh, at least half a dozen, at least 5 or 6. And a couple members of my cast of the show, of Uncovering Aliens, a couple people we met. There was a sweet, sweet British girl that we met in London when we took a trip there in 2012 as we were getting ready for the show. And they wanted us to work with her as we would, if it was the show, just to sort of do a test run. And she was never meant to be on TV. So she wasn't doing this to get on television. And I'm sitting here and she's telling her story, and it's more and more obvious the more questions are asked and the more answers she gives that she's not crazy, that she's not making this up for attention.
You mean she was consistent?
That she was consistent, and that she's also sincerely, desperately hoping that we can help her make this stop.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, when somebody touches when you feel that from somebody, that to me, that's truth. And
absolutely.
I'm like, she has nothing to gain by this.
She doesn't want it.
And she was very small and vulnerable, and I really felt terrible for her. So, so then again, I met several other people during the filming of the show, like Tom Reed and the Reed brothers, who I sincerely felt had genuine experiences. Those were powerful experiences for me. But again, it's personal. My job on the show is to try to find proof. And there's one guy that I think we got some proof of his experience, but for the most part, it's been compelling and it just gets you. It gets you on a personal, emotional level.
But I think just because there's only one or two that you find proof, I think that even makes it more kind of interesting for people like yourself and like us, because if everybody seemed like it was truthful, it would just be, to me, boring. So I think there was one guy we investigated who I just really was a real wannabe. You could tell.
Right. Yeah, you can. Read it.
I just think he kind of exaggerated his experience in his own mind, and you could tell that pretty quick that he wasn't really genuine. And I don't think he was lying. I think he really convinced himself of some things, but he just did not have the
sincerity.
Yeah, sincerity that you say to yourself, oh, okay, for sure this really happened to him.
Yeah, you can always tell those people. It's like whenever Mariah Carey walks out on stage, she's trying to figure out which camera's the best angle.
Yeah. Am I the only one who thinks Mariah Carey is super insincere?
Oh, no, there's two of us now.
Oh,
yeah, I just remember when she would say things like, oh, thank you so much. And I'm like, she doesn't really give a shit. She just wants you to, I don't know.
You can feel that. And so I want to ask you this real interesting question that you actually provoked. So do you think, and I'm not talking crap about the government or anything, it's just my own personal perspective.
Because after all, the IRS might be listening.
So. Thank you. Well, they're happy with me. I send in my damn checks.
NSA.
But whenever we hear about how the government agencies and different people, they want to, quote, slowly condition the Americans or the Chinese or whatever it is, they're saying stuff like that. But I'm going to ask, it's a twofold question. The first is, what really would happen, honestly, if a, quote, peaceful series of ships landed in different parts of the world and we didn't fucking kill them? But if they landed in different parts of the world and they literally just were and visited us, the whole world saw it, and then they just sort of took off, what do you personally think would happen?
I think we'd go back to business pretty quickly.
Me too.
I do too.
I think it would. I think it would be kind of like, oh, that's great. Who do you think's going to win the game this weekend? It would change us a little bit in the sense that I think there'd be some spiritual awakening because of it.
Yes.
And there'd be a lot of political debate about it, about the relevance of the church and things like that. But I think that would pretty much be it. If they really went away and said, we're not coming back for a couple hundred years, don't worry about it, I think it would eventually fade. And it also would become something, kind of to the point where, 50 years, let's say they said we're going away, we're not going to come back for a few hundred years, but it was nice to see you guys. I think within probably a generation or two that people would probably say the whole thing was faked and was never real and never really happened.
Absolutely.
It's funny because the film Interstellar that I was just talking about earlier, there's actually a thing there where your daughter's failing this class because she wrote a whole essay about how we really did go to the moon.
Didn't go to the moon. I've
seen
the movie twice.
You just change it. I
change history.
We kind of would go back, but again, I think that goes back to some people are so anxious for us to be spiritually developed and take the next level, and in this world. And I, what if that's not really why this planet exists? I mean, maybe we're really here just to be blocked away from this higher knowledge and to have amnesia about who we really are and where we really came from, so that we make our decisions kind of in this cutoff sort of 3D existence. So
yeah,
I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing.
I don't think it's a bad thing either. I think I'm a firm believer in the soul and the non-physical part of us, that we make those contracts and those pacts with our soul group or the non-physical part of ourselves before we enter these human bodies. Mm-hmm. And then when people come up to me and they go, I want to remember all of my past lives. And I'm like, no, you don't.
No, you don't.
You're going to you will end up absolutely schizophrenic. Yeah. If you had access to all of that. I don't even care if I remember what I had for breakfast this morning, as long as I'm a happy camper at lunch. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I agree with you. I think we're here. I do believe in the spiritual philosophy that the earth is a school, and that we choose to come here to learn how to deliberately create, how to elevate our consciousness and expand, and hopefully create a community here where we're all getting along. We've been not very successful at that.
Well, I mean, I don't know that I'm sure that I agree with you on that, because I think like we raise ourselves spiritually. Well, I mean, I read about people like Dr. King, who formed the Aetherius Society. They spend all their time on meditation and raising their kundalini and all this stuff, and not eating a steak and not having sex and not drinking alcohol. And I'm like, I'm not sure that's really why we're here. I mean, maybe we are supposed to come here and drink and smoke and have sex and make, have sloppy, bad relationships and screw up. I mean, maybe that's serving our soul better than that focus on spirituality. It's almost like an escape to some extent, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. And I think it's a school to learn exactly what we're both talking about simultaneously, to bang around, to get it wrong, and to keep getting it wrong till we decide, us as individuals, to step outside of whatever those effed up patterns are for us personally.
Yeah, or maybe just to have some fun too.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of fun stuff to do here too. So
that's what I'm saying.
Interesting.
Well, we're getting close to out of time already, but I want to ask you about Valiant Thor. Did you ever see the film, the documentary, or read the book Stranger at the Pentagon?
I have heard of it, yes. And that's the one about the guy who's sort of the Nordic dude who came to Earth or something along those lines?
1957.
In the late 50s, and lived under the Pentagon.
Late 50s, yeah. That's not the one where they show the guy who looks like an extra from Vikings. Oh yeah, it is. Okay. Oh. Yeah, TV show Vikings. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
Looks like Bjorn from Vikings.
I mean, do you think that we humans, some of our authority figures have met and pedestrians too, but have met not as an abduction, but met face to face and negotiated any technology or even interactive. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to say that I think yes, but the thing that's so interesting is that when you talk to abductees or when you listen to their stories, it's very rare that anybody has an experience with them that is in any way, shape, or form close to what we would consider to be an awake, alert, conscious state. It's always in some altered conscious state, it seems like, for the most part.
But don't you think
so? I'm just, it's like, maybe that's the way it always is. Maybe that's the way it has to be. I don't know. I mean, I think to myself it makes sense, but can I tell you guys a story?
Sure.
About this
Yeah,
real quick?
please.
Go for it.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story that I cannot support, although I will tell you the person that told it to me, I know him to be a truthful person. I know that the people that he told me he heard it from, he does know and he does spend time with. And I know that the person who told the story is sincerely telling the story.
Okay.
So the story is that in the early 1960s, that let's go back to the 80s when Ronald Reagan was president. That Shirley MacLaine told my friend that she went to the White House to visit Ron and Nancy because they were longtime friends in the mid 80s, and they were in the residence of the White House, and that they were sitting down talking, and she was asking Ron about UFOs, and Ron said, "Well, I can't really tell you much of anything, but I can tell you what happened to me and Nancy back in '61." Mm-hmm. And she said, "Okay, what's that?" And the story was that they were coming home from a night in Hollywood. They were on Mulholland Drive, which at that time was fairly undeveloped. It was kind of an empty road. There was a lot of woods around and stuff, and not much in the way of development or houses. And President Reagan said that this bright light was following them from behind. It passed over their car, and it landed in front of them with landing gear. Their car stopped. Out of the flying saucer comes aliens, and they walked up to the car door, and Ron's side, the driver's side, and Ron says to Nancy, "Well, what do you think I ought to do?" And she says, "Well, I suppose you better open up the window, roll the window down and see what he wants." So she rolled the window down, and the alien says to Reagan, we don't want you to work for GE anymore." And at the time, he was hosting the GE Theater on NBC television, General Electric Theater. He said that GE is working with our enemies, and what we want you to do is we want you to quit your job with GE. We will find people to back you in politics. We want you to run for governor of California, and then we want you to run for president.
Wow.
And he said, "Okay." And the aliens got back in, and that was that. And it's interesting because he did resign. Now, this is one of these bizarre stories, but it is from my friend who I am 100% convinced is telling me the truth, partly because he was like, "I know this is going to sound crazy, but this is what Shirley told me." Mm-hmm. And I don't know why Shirley MacLaine would make it up. And I know he knows Shirley MacLaine, and I know that they have dinner a couple of times a year.
Yeah.
So, and I know that she knew the Reagans, and I know that she'd been to the White House in the 80s, and why would she make that up about the Reagans? So it's possible that these exact kinds of things have happened.
Yeah. And because if angels can manifest in physical form from time to time to intervene in for whatever reason with certain people, why can't other multidimensional beings do the exact same thing?
Yeah, and again, you have to take a physical form that can be recognized by other people.
Which is a really quick question because we have like 2 minutes left. But
sure.
I got a quick one too.
Did he talk about what form these beings took that got out of the ship? Were they grays? Were they reptilian? Were they cute? What was it?
I did not ask that question.
Okay.
My impression was that they were the standard grays.
Okay.
That they were the standard grays.
Well,
bring it back down to Earth. When your first book, Dark Mission, the Secret History of the Moon, of NASA, with Hoagie. Can you tell us, how that started and what's the take on the book? I mean, now we have NASA and they're branching out with other, Planet X and other entities that they're doing stuff. So, and I know that NASA initially was part of the CIA. So,
well, it's actually part of the Defense Department.
Defense Department.
Well, I guess to answer the question, how it started was that we had put all this stuff out on the web, many articles we had written, and it was really frustrating to us that people would not connect the dots between a story we'd done a year and a half ago and the one we had now. And I said, well, Richard, it's all on the web, it's free, it's kind of just sitting out there. I said, let's put it into a book and give people a linear, timeline kind of thing for how we came to the different conclusions about NASA and their duplicity and the things that they've been untruthful about. So that's how we put it together. And really, it's called The Secret History of NASA because so much of the information, which is now common knowledge, was not common knowledge at all before we put the book out.
And
it's really fascinating to me.
What was your biggest aha?
In 1 minute or less.
I think the biggest aha for me is that basically during the 1960s, during the Apollo missions, that NASA and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, who runs all the unmanned probes, were controlled by people in positions of high authority who were all members of secret societies. Those secret societies, we call them the Nazis, the Masons, and the Magicians. They all had the same root belief system, which is that they worshipped the Egyptian gods Isis and Osiris and Horus as extraterrestrial gods.
Wow.
And I think the purpose of the entire purpose of NASA was to go to the moon and bring back the technology, bring back the proof that they're, of their faith, that this is where the human race had come from.
Wow.
You've got that just opened up a whole door where you're going to have to come back.
Coming attractions, folks.
I know.
Okay.
Well, definitely you're going to be at the Conscious Life Expo this year coming.
I can't wait for it. I was really glad to hear they're a sponsor. There's such a great experience there, and I'm going to be doing a couple different things: a workshop, a lecture, panels, and you stop me in the hall or catch me in the bar, and we can talk about anything you guys want.
Actually, we're going to have a booth, and we're going to be streaming live for 3 days
on air.
So
absolutely,
you're gonna
I'll drop
in.
by and we'll do
by.
an expanded show. I can't wait for that.
Yes. All right. Well, Mike Bara, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And go to mikebara.blogspot.com. So make sure you check him out. Go to Amazon, pick up his books. I'm going to put those up on display.
One R, Bara, Bara.
Yeah, Bara. But it was an honor, and I appreciate you guys taking the time and being a part of the show today.
Thank you guys for having me. It was great.
Thanks,
all right. Thank you, sir. All right. Well, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we have Nick Pope on the show. If you guys want to talk more aliens, we have more for you.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, he was 21 years at the Ministry of Defense. And he's going to tell in England, the old England. And he's going to talk about UFOs, all his projects that he studied and researched and was assigned while he was on that post. So, all right, don't go anywhere. On air with Tony Sweet on Universal Broadcasting
Truth Be Told
Network.